Sukuna is one of the most polarizing characters we have seen in anime. He takes the inner demon trope that we all know of to a different level. There's a love-hate relationship we have with Sukuna. There are many reasons I'm going to share with you today, to where if you don't believe it already, by the end of this video, you should believe that Sukuna is the king of Jujutsu. First, I want to say if you enjoy the content, then I would appreciate it if you could subscribe to the channel, as I'll be posting videos every few days on different topics that you guys recommend me and a few of my own. Now let's get into the video. To first take a deep dive into Sukuna's character, we have to first cover his backstory and all the information we knew about him before he appears present day. You see, although we know him as a curse today, Sukuna was once actually a man. We know that he was once a curse user, but was so evil that he was more comparable to that of a natural disaster. We also know that he was the king of curses back in the day and age where sorcerers and curses were more vicious. Everyone around him was terrified of him. Even before he was a curse, he was always known as the king of curses. We also know that the word Sukuna is supposed to resemble power. We don't know exactly how, but he did die over 1,000 years ago, and he was sealed into 20 different fingers to conceal his power. And that brings us to the beginning of the series. After Yuji eats one of Sukuna's fingers, Sukuna reincarnates within Yuji. Now, Megumi is terrified when he first sees that this happens, but Yuji is somehow able to control Sukuna to some degree. He's able to take control of his own body back. But Megumi doesn't care. He says anyways, I will now exercise the curse known as Yuji Itadori. But good for Megumi, Gojo pulls up, as now we know it would have been very bad for Megumi if Sukuna had to fight him. And now we get to the fight between One Finger Sukuna and Gojo. We see Gojo tell Yuji to basically let him fight Sukuna for 10 seconds. Then after 10 seconds, take control again. Yuji says, I don't know about this, but Gojo says, don't worry, I'm the strongest Jujutsu sorcerer. And then we see the fight begin. Sukuna lunges towards Gojo, but Gojo clasps his hands together and warps away. We see Sukuna is completely surprised of this, and he says he's unbelievably fast. No, it's not just that. It doesn't matter what era it is, you guys are always a pain, you stupid Jujutsu sorcerers. And then he uses his slashing attack and says, but that doesn't matter to me. Of course, it doesn't hit Gojo because Gojo has infinity. And then we see Gojo count down 7, 8, 9. It should be about time. And then Yuji takes control over his body again. This initial interaction, of course, Sukuna only had one finger's worth of power. But it's still interesting to know that even after encountering Gojo once, in the first hand-to-hand they had, he notices that something is off. He says, no, it's not just that. It's like he knows that there's something up with Gojo before even really engaging with him. Now, this doesn't matter. This is not like a bad feat for Sukuna. Oh, he got beat by Gojo if he had one finger of power. Because there is something we do know about Sukuna. On the back of one of the volumes, it says, in a world where cursed spirits feed on unsuspecting humans, fragments of the legendary and feared demon Ryoma Sukuna have been lost and scattered about. Should any demon consume Sukuna's body parts, the power they gain could destroy the world as we know it. They literally say that the power of Sukuna can destroy the world. So we know that him getting all 20 of his fingers back would be very devastating. And that is why the Jujutsu Society wants to exorcise Yuji after he's consumed fingers. While hearing Gojo talk about the Jujutsu Society to Yuji, Sukuna comes out and says a hierarchy not based purely on strength is boring if you ask me. This is because obviously Sukuna is used to hierarchies based on strength. Because, you know, he was the hierarchy. He was the peak of that hierarchy. And then this is where we see Sukuna says, when I make this kid's body mine, you'll be the first one I kill. He's talking to Gojo here. And Gojo says, me, a target of the great Sukuna, what an honor. And Yuji says, so he really is famous. And Gojo says, Ryoma Sukuna, with 4 arms and 2 faces, is a demon of legend. The truth is, he was a human who actually existed, but that was over 1,000 years ago. In the golden age of Jujutsu sorcerers had sharpened their skills against him, but were ultimately defeated. With the title Ryoma Sukuna, he would traverse the ages after his death as a cursed object. We Jujutsu sorcerers wouldn't even be able to destroy his remains preserved in their own grave wax. Without a doubt, he is the king of curses. And this is where Yuji questions and says, is he stronger than you, sensei? To where Gojo says, good question. If Sukuna were to completely regain his power, it might be a little tough. Where Yuji says, would you lose? And Gojo says, nah, I'd win. Now, of course, this is one of the most debated about topics in the Jujutsu Kaisen community. about Gojo saying he would win. Of course, there's no way for Gojo to actually know that he would win in a fight with 20 Finger Sukuna because, he's never actually seen 20 Finger Sukuna fight. He's more so going off the legends and tales he's heard and just thinks that because of the own abilities that he has that he would be able to win. But either way, just somebody thinking they will win a fight obviously does not mean they would. I'm not saying that Gojo would lose to Sukuna, but I'm more so saying that just him saying he would win does not mean he would win. But you guys know that already. Now we see a moment where Nobara, Megumi, and Yuji have to fight the Finger Bearer, and we see that Megumi gets put in such a bad position that he uses his signal, the howl from his dog. And then we see Sukuna come out of Yuji and says, no matter how you slice it, you're such an annoying brat. Now, to no surprise, Sukuna makes light work of the Finger Bearer. And it's important to keep in mind that Yuji had only consumed 2 fingers up to this point. Once in the first chapter of the manga, and the second one when Gojo brought him back to the school. And with only 2 fingers worth of fingers, he opens a domain and beats a special grade curse. We also see that Sukuna is mad to even be compared to this curse. He says, did you know you and I are categorized as special grade, me and this insect? As if even being in a special grade tier with this curse is insulting. Which honestly it is. Imagine if you were the king 1,000 years ago, you were the strongest person back then, and now you're being compared to a finger bearer in today's society. You would be insulted too. Now this is where we see Sukuna come outside and come across a Megumi, and he eats another finger and says just to make sure. He also removes his heart before fighting Megumi, and even without a heart, he is just absolutely ragdolling him. We see him throw Megumi into the sky, then punch him down. It is a complete one-sided beatdown. And Megumi realizes that since he can't win with fighting, he decides to try to win the fight with words. And this is where Megumi says to Yuji, I'm not a hero, I am a Jujutsu sorcerer. That's why I never regretted saving you, not even for a moment. And these heartwarming words change Sukuna back to Yuji. And he says, I see, you're so smart, Fushiguro, thinking about all sorts of stuff unlike me. I think your way of doing things is also right, but that doesn't mean mine isn't. And then he falls and dies. Now we know this isn't the end of Yuji in the manga, as he makes a deal with Sukuna to bring him back to life. And this is because Sukuna can stay alive within his own innate domain even after, Yuji's body has technically died. But this was just a glimpse of power to what we know comes next. And this is when we see Yuji have to go fight against Mahito. Now, even though Mahito isn't like his baby form to what we know he eventually grows into, we see that when he tries to use Idol Transfiguration on Yuji, he comes across Sukuna's soul. And Sukuna says, you dare attempt to touch my soul. We shared a laugh at the brat's expense, so I'll forgive you just this one time. Know your place, fool. Now we see a moment where Mahito opens the domain on Nanami and captures him, and Yuji has to find a way to go save Nanami. So he runs into Mahito's domain. But doing so made Sukuna's soul interact with Mahito again. And Sukuna says, I told you there wouldn't be a second time. And now this is where something very important happens, and I need you guys to pay attention for this. We see a scan that on Viz, it says, with no concern for anyone but himself, he existed for leisure. For Ryoma Sukuna, whether Nanami or Mahito survives doesn't matter at all. This is what Viz says for the translation. But another translation team says something different, and I'll show you guys right now. In a different translation, after Sukuna splits Mahito's shoulder, they say, throughout heaven and earth, he alone is the honored one. Only his pleasure and displeasure exist. So in this translation, they say that Sukuna himself is the honored one. It's just something to keep in mind, whether you agree or disagree with it, because we do know that the kanji used are the same, but for some reason Viz translates it differently. They don't call Sukuna the honored one like other translators do. Now the next important fights that we have to get into is when Sukuna comes across Jogo. We see Jogo feed Yuji 10 fingers, and he says that Itadori has consumed at least 15. So for future reference, I'll be referring to this Sukuna as 15 finger Sukuna. And then we see after Jogo feeds him the fingers, Sukuna says, you have 1 second, move. And then he just dashes back. And this is where we see Jogo say, so this is Sukuna. Sukuna's strength is different from that of Satoru Gojo's. It's overwhelmingly evil. I'm scared that any move we make will mean our deaths. And then you see the girl say, breathe, breathe. Wait, is it even okay to breathe? He won't kill us for breathing, will he? Do you see how strong 15-finger Sukuna's presence is? Even while missing 5 fingers, they are afraid to even breathe. Jogo is a special grade curse, so even though that when Dagon was fighting Naobito, he compared Jogo's speed to Naobito's, and if you remember, Naobito is supposed to be the second fastest sorcerer alive. Even with that in mind, Jogo is so afraid. They're wondering if they can breathe. They're saying that his strength is overwhelmingly evil. And then we see Sukuna use his curse technique and slice the top of Jogo's head off. Now we see Sukuna spliff the girls, and now he talks to Jogo and he says, "You're next, cursed spirit, what do you need?" Jogo says nothing. "Our objective is to fully revive you. Right now, Itadori is helpless to counter, but this is only temporary. Surely you know that better than anyone." We see Jogo say, "Make a binding vow with Yuji Itadori before he takes control again. A binding vow that'll let you take over his body permanently." And Sukuna says, "Not necessary, I have my own plans. But you cursed spirits sure are desperate too. As a token of my appreciation for the fingers, if you can land even one hit on me, I'll do as you cursed spirits ask for now. As for my first order of business, how about I kill every human in Shibuya? All but one, that is." And Jogo says this is a deal. But remember, before going into this fight with Jogo, the deal is he only has to hit him once. Now the funny part about this fight is that it just skips to Jogo being flung in the air with Sukuna. Sukuna's just smiling, saying, "Is that all you got, cursed spirit?" And we see this horrified look on Jogo's face where he's bleeding and you can only see the whites of his eyes. We see Sukuna go on to beat down Jogo some more until they get inside a building, and where Jogo remembers a conversation he had back with Kenjaku where he asked Kenjaku, "How strong am I in terms of Sukuna fingers?" And Kenjaku says, "Being generous, I'd say 8 or 9. And Jogo says, I knew it, but I didn't think the difference would be this great." And we see Sukuna go over to try to console him. He's basically teasing him and says, "Come on, you can still do it. I'll keep you company until I get bored." And this makes Jogo extremely angry. He decides to throw out a maximum meteor. And in the fan book, it says that Maximum Meteor can level an entire town at all 4 ends. We see after the meteor hits the ground, Jogo says even Sukuna must have suffered some damage from that, to which Sukuna replies, "If it hits." And then he asks Jogo, "Why don't you use your domain?" Jogo says, "I know I'd lose in a battle of domains." And Sukuna says, "Is it because that's what happened with Satoru Gojo, spoken like a true loser?" And he says, "But since things are getting interesting, how about I fight using your specialty, open? Those are flames." We see that Sukuna has some flames technique and he says, "Oh, that's right. I thought you know about this, but I suppose a cursed spirit wouldn't." To which Jogo says, "Doesn't Sukuna's curse technique involve slicing and slashing?" To which Sukuna says, "Don't worry, I won't cheat by revealing my curse technique. Get ready, let's have a firepower battle." And it's funny because going into the firepower battle, you can see Jogo's tears streaming down his face. Like, look at his mouth. Buddy is not confident in any way that he is about to win this battle. We see this sort of philosophical moment between Sukuna and Jogo where Sukuna says to Jogo, "You should have burnt everything you desire to a cinder to reach the heights of Satoru Gojo and not worry about your future or identity, but you lack the hunger to take hold of your desires." And Jogo says, "You're probably right." And Sukuna says, "But you know this was actually fun while it lasted. Humans, Jujutsu sorcerers, cursed spirits. You're not bad compared to those I fought over the last 1,000 years. Stand proud, you're strong." And then he just burns Jogo to death. It's sort of funny how he just flipped the switch. He went all sentimental on Jogo, then just burns him to death. But it's just a testament to how easily he dealt with Jogo, somebody who was supposed to be as fast as Naobito. He was just blitzing him and beating him up back to back to back. Now the next fight we have to cover is Sukuna's interaction with Mahoraga. Now at the start of the fight, we see Mahoraga tries to slice Sukuna with the sword. And Sukuna says, "If I was still a cursed spirit, I would have been a goner." It's because the sword that Mahoraga sliced with is enveloped in positive energy. And we know that those are like poison to cursed spirits. But unlucky for Mahoraga, Sukuna is in Yuji's body. He is a human. And then we see Sukuna just start to blitz around Mahoraga using Dismantle over and over, cutting Mahoraga. We also see that when he tries to use Dismantle and facing Mahoraga face forward, Mahoraga deflects the attack, and Sukuna actually seems happy to see that this happened, or more so surprised. He says, "It deflected the attack. You can see it, you can see my curse technique." It's as if this is either the first time or one of the few times this has ever happened. Then we see Mahoraga hit Sukuna so hard he goes flying through a bunch of buildings, to which Sukuna then says, "My turn," and tries to split Mahoraga in half. And then he says, if I'm understanding this correctly, it'll stand up. To which Sukuna says is similar to Yamata no Orochi. That second attack, unlike the first attack which was imbued with positive energy, the second was imbued with curse energy. As for my attack, it was able to recognize dismantle. Both occurred after that wheel on its back turned. And this is where we learn that the Furu's incantation of the 10 sacred treasures in that wheel represent a complete cycle in harmony. I bet that Shikigami's power is the ability to adapt to any and all phenomena, kind of like a late throw in rock, paper, scissors. And this is where Sukuna says if it was me from that time, it may have been able to beat me. And the me from that time that he is referring to is when he was only 3 fingers worth of curse energy. Even after encountering Mahoraga getting sent flying through buildings, he still says, oh yeah, you maybe would have beat me if I only was back in my 3-finger form. And this is when he says, you've piqued my interest in Megami Fushiguro, and he opens his domain. And this is where we get more information about Malevolent Shrine. It says Malevolent Shrine differs from other types of domain expansions in that it doesn't create a separate space using a barrier. The ability to realize one's innate domain without using a barrier is akin to an artist painting a masterpiece not on a canvas but in the air. A truly divine technique. Furthermore, by allowing an escape route, a binding vow is formed which vastly increases the guarantee hit's effective area to a maximum radius of nearly 200 meters. Taking Megami Fushiguro into account, Sukuna narrowed the effect range to a 140 meter radius above the surface. And then we see Sukuna begin to destroy the entirety of Shibuya. And this is where we learn what his domain does. For anything with curse energy within range, cleave. For inanimate objects, dismantle. Until Malevolent Shrine is gone, it will relentlessly attack all targets within the effective range of its guaranteed hit. The only way to defeat Mahoraga is to slaughter with a new attack before it can adapt. Cleave fits the criteria. However, if it hasn't adapted only to dismantle but to slashing attacks in general, then, and we see Mahoraga actually begins to get up, and this is because Mahoraga has this regeneration. So Sukuna just opens up the flames and one-shots Mahoraga. Now we know in the fan book it says that these flames from Sukuna burn you down to the bone marrow. It is not something weak at all. The moment it touches you, you get disintegrated, which is what we see happen to Mahoraga. Now I do want to say spoilers, beware for what I'm about to say, so if you haven't been keeping up with the recent chapters, then I gave you a warning. But for all of the people who knows what's happened in the recent chapters, Sukuna has now jumped inside of Megami's body. And we see that he actually uses Megami's curse technique, the 10 Shadows. And we see that when he summons a Nue on top of a building, his Nue is extremely huge. If I were to give an estimate, it looks about 300 meters from one wing to the other. It is almost as big as the building it is standing on. And it's sort of crazy how Sukuna has plotted this whole ordeal from the moment he saw Megami. We always knew that he had his eye on Megami since the beginning of the series. He always said that there was something interesting on the way, and he even saved Megami's life a couple times throughout the series. And we didn't really know why this was until the recent chapters, but we now know why, and that was to gain Megami's techniques. Now we also saw where the angel started doing this Jacob's ladder technique on Sukuna, and he actually began to lose his life, but he faked out the angel in the end. And the most recent chapter that we got, in the end, it honestly looks like he's about to consume the angel and possibly gain her curse technique. So my question to you guys is, do you think that Sukuna will gain her curse technique? And if so, what is to come next? Do you think that with the Angel's Curse technique, he will be able to beat Gojo? And we don't even have to just stop at Gojo. Do you think that even if everybody jumps him, do they stand a chance? And when I mean everybody, I'm talking about people like Maki, Yuta, Hakari, Kashimo, and Ryu. And I can even throw in Uro. If you have all of them jump Sukuna at once, do they have a chance at even beating him? The Gojo fight on its own is debatable, so I will let you guys choose who you think wins that fight. Sukuna with the Angel's Curse technique. And remember, the Angel's Curse technique has the ability to extinguish any other curse technique. So that does mean that it'll be able to extinguish the Limitless. So you basically have a fight between Sukuna and Gojo where Infinity isn't there to protect Gojo anymore. And do you guys think that even without the Infinity, Gojo will be able to beat Sukuna? I'm not gonna lie guys, the odds for Gojo are looking slim in this fight, but I'll let you guys decide in the comments who you think wins in that battle. We also need to see what will happen when Sukuna faces off against the Jujutsu Society. I believe that individually, yes, Sukuna beats everyone, but I do believe that maybe, just maybe Yuta, Hakari, Ryu, Uro, Kashimo, and Maki all jumping Sukuna together may be able to beat him. But you know, the problem there is that Sukuna should just be able to open a domain and beat them all. But even without a domain, do you guys think that Sukuna will be able to beat all of them with speed and power alone? I can't wait to see what Sukuna does next, and I'm sure you can't either. But if you want to stay up to date on everything going on with the manga, then you should subscribe to the channel as I post videos on leaks as they come out, so you can always get the news quickly. Also, I would appreciate if you could leave a like on the video, and honestly, stick around as I post videos every couple days on different topics so you guys recommend me and a few of my own. Thank you for watching. See you next time.